How is it possible to keep creating in the times of the corona crisis we are living? This is a very important question for all the people involved in the performing arts, because the performing arts, theater, dance, opera, are very much impacted by this crisis. To speak about this and to try to think about the possibilities that we still have during this crisis, we have here at the Aix-en-Provence Festival, in this series of debates organized for our digital stage, we have the honor to welcome 4 guests who are deeply involved in this question. And I will just explain why. We are now in the last days of June. And since more than 2 weeks, in spite of the fact that we are the public festival, all the public events of the festival that were planned since years have been cancelled, there is still some activity in Aix-en-Provence in the frame of the festival, because we are organizing a few recitals that are filmed for Arte. And since 2 weeks and a half, we are rehearsing one of the shows that were supposed to be created this year, and it is the world creation of Innocence, the new opera by Kaija Saariaho on a libretto by Sophie Oksanen. We will be rehearsing until mid-July, until the piano dress rehearsal, which is the last important step for the staging, so that the show is ready to be completed and performed next year. So we have singers, a stage director, a composer, a conductor, assistants, technical crew, etc., as it is usually in our festival in May and June. The only strange thing is that we won't have an opening night at the end. Well, the opening night will come in many, many months. I will just let my guests introduce themselves, and then we will talk about this question: how do we keep creating in these times?
Hello, I'm Magdalena Kožená, and I'm singing a role of waitress in this wonderful piece. I'm actually singing my own language, which is for a Czech person quite a special thing, because our language is quite rare, and to be part of this thing is for me absolutely brilliant.
Hi, I'm Simon Stone. I'm directing the world premiere of Kaija Saariaho's Innocence.
I am Kaija Saariaho. I am the composer of Innocence, the opera that we are working on now here.
I'm Pierre Audi, the general director of the Aix-en-Provence Festival.
My first question to understand what we are trying to achieve now in Aix-en-Provence is to start from the beginning of the crisis, because I suspect there was a point where all of you realized that the world creation in the first days of July wouldn't be possible this year in summer 2020. So what was your reaction and the reaction of all of you from your perspective?
When I learned that Innocence will not happen this summer, it was, of course, very disappointing and shocking. This is a project with which I've been working for 8 years. It has been difficult work, and I was anticipating and waiting so much to finally see and hear it happening. So it has been quite a roller coaster, and I must say that I'm so thankful for Pierre Audi, who has brought us here these weeks.
Pierre, it is interesting to know, because for you it was especially difficult, I think, to come to any decision. Could you tell us a little bit about these very complicated months and how you finally came to the decision to maintain this rehearsing period?
I've had a long experience in my life with modern works and world premieres, and I know that those kinds of projects are the most fragile projects that any opera institution could get involved in, because they are already big risks for organizations to put out a new work that nobody has ever heard of. Modern music tends to scare people. It requires a lot of courage and hard work to realize it, convince an audience of its importance, and then be kind of responsible for it happening on an optimum level the first time, because if it doesn't work the first time, the work will have to wait a long time before it's produced again. So for me, these kinds of operations are very, very tricky. And I knew that if I abandoned my role as midwife to this project, I say midwife because it's really like a birth, I would almost certainly be letting the project drift along this sea of uncertainty which has gripped the whole world of the arts, and with a very strong chance that the work may end up either not happening or happening in not ideal conditions somewhere we have no idea where, and certainly not immediately. I very quickly in March, the beginning of March, knew that the safest way that this could happen was to try to immediately rehearse it if possible, put it in a jar, convince all the co-producers to allow the festival to continue to look after this fetus, this potential baby, new work, and deliver it in X, hopefully, as soon as it will be possible. That's what I spent a long time trying to do. It was a little bit like playing poker, because every week we just didn't know. And I just asked basically all the artists. I asked Kaija, I asked Simon, and we asked all the singers to just give us time. That was our plan. In fact, we started even more ambitiously. We started with the idea of maybe actually doing it all and getting it streamed and filmed also in this period. I think it's because we started so ambitiously that in the end, when finally we had to scale down our ambitions, we had to kind of tailor-make the risks that we could take to French law. That left us with the good possibility of going ahead with rehearsals in conditions which are strong, because we wouldn't be taking a risk of bringing an orchestra and a chorus to X, but we would be giving Simon and his team the stage immediately with the set, which was of course all ready. And we were going to hope that the atmosphere in X, which is a magical town, as you know, and the summer would actually be a comforting atmosphere for creating a laboratory in which everybody would be just slowly bringing this piece to life. And in fact, in the end, I felt also from experience that maybe this accident is actually the best thing that could happen to this world premiere, because it will help everybody to really sort of work on it without the pressure of the premiere. And also the period that will follow, where everything will be left aside on standby, will be a period of assimilation and reflection, which I think for modern music is very, very interesting, because you know what you really want in the end is the performers and the production to speak to the audience as if it was lived through. And I think we're getting this lived through bonus from actually the process that we're involved in. So in a way, I'm kind of thrilled that we succeeded with also the understanding of the co-producers and the courage of the artists to actually do this. And we're keeping our fingers crossed till the end of the process. And it's a fabulous atmosphere to go in there and watch everybody working, slowly bringing it to life in Simon's also daring approach. You know, that's what this festival's about. You know, that's what putting on this work is all about.
For several weeks, we asked all the artists involved to be patient. These artists were in the black, not knowing what would happen. Magdalena, how was this period for you? Because I suspect it was not easy, especially when you have to learn a very difficult new role and you don't know if you have really to work hard to know it by heart, or if it will be postponed in 1 or 2 years and it could you could wait a little bit. How was this period for you?
At the beginning, of course, we were all very worried and that it might not happen at all and when it's going to happen. But I am, a little bit of a freak in the sense that I always study everything very much in advance. So I started to work on this role before COVID. So I basically already knew it when the COVID came. So for me, I have to say, I think it's a complete miracle that we are all here. I have to say, I didn't believe in it, and I think it's fantastic, Pierre, that you just managed actually to bring us all here, because as you said as well, not only contemporary pieces, but I think any pieces we are working at, it's always better to really rehearse it and to digest it and think about it, and actually having now this one more year time, I think will do everybody and the piece really good, because we will know the structure, the frame, we will know what Simon has in mind, the shape of it, and then everybody can just take that home and work on it. So hopefully at the end, I think we will somehow profit from this situation.
And you, Simon, how did you react when you realized that this show wouldn't be presented in front of an audience this summer?
I knew that I was the last person that needed to be adding any anxiety to the situation. So I just told Pierre that I was ready to do whatever needed to be done. And I was happy to wait and find out what the reality was. Of course, I'd been preparing this work. We were really ready to start working, but my work starts, a second phase starts at the beginning of rehearsals. So I had less kind of horror at the idea of this being postponed, because my work is to then come and facilitate bringing something to life, but I haven't created it like Kaija did. Kaija's nervousness about the uncertainty about that, I could well imagine, and certainly singers who cancel other projects or have a variety of different things that they could have been doing, and they prioritize doing this work years in advance. We're very lucky, and the singers in this project are very lucky. There are unemployed artists all over the world right now who don't know where their next paycheck is coming from. And I had just finished making a movie, which means that I was still being paid to edit a film. So I didn't have any financial problems. So my anxieties were negligible in relationship to the anxieties of all the people around me. So I was just there saying, let's make it happen, let's do it, and I'll be there and I'll be ready. And I luckily had the experience of doing 3 weeks worth of work immediately before coming here in Amsterdam at the International Theatre Amsterdam. And that really was, I think, one of the first rehearsals in the world that was happening, where we were trying out these COVID measures. And that was really great practice for this. Also really very affirming to realize there's no need to worry that the spirit of the piece will get lost. I know a lot of people have said, I'm worried that we'll lose the essence of the art form that we're making if we rehearse it under unideal circumstances. But we imagine a lot in our line of work. Often we have sets that don't appear until the technical rehearsals. Often there are huge effects like fire or fake explosions or water, for example, or rain or snow, things that we usually have on stage, but that of course we can't afford to have in the rehearsal room, or we just can't logistically realize in a rehearsal room. And so singers and actors in spoken theatre often do rehearsals where they're saying, oh, well, we'll deal with that when we get it, or I'll just imagine it for now. And the having to imagine being closer than 1.5 meters to each other is something that is not a huge obstacle. And to anyone out there who still hasn't gone into a rehearsal, don't panic. It's actually really inspiring, and it's good to have some limitations every now and then. Speaking
about limitations, could you tell us very pragmatically what was set up for these rehearsals? What is special? What are the health conditions that you have to respect and that change a little bit your usual way of rehearsing?
When anyone comes within the safe distance, social distancing guidelines, 1.5, 2 meters, they need to have a mask on. And obviously, we try to only do that when people aren't going to be creating any saliva or whatever, just during a brief moment of just trying two people holding each other. But really, we've done that once or twice in the entire show, because I've mostly said, well, you're singing at the moment, so I don't think it's a good idea if you get close to each other. So just don't worry about that right now. And just imagine that you're going to kiss each other or hold each other or do something when that's legal again. And when it's safe again. Hopefully that will be before we need to do the show next year. We're all hoping. Then we've got just basic social distancing. We've got so everyone's just standing further apart than they actually will be. In some situations, not. Everyone who doesn't need to be moving around a lot or communicating a lot and comes into close contact with other people wears masks at all times. There's a huge level of responsibility on the individual to make sure that they don't forget and that they don't come into contact with other people. A few times we've had to remind everyone, please do remember that we're in exceptional circumstances at the moment, because of course you forget, you have an instinct, and then you go, well, no, and either the other person steps away and reestablishes the correct distance, or we talk about it and we say that might be getting a bit too close. It's sometimes not everyone has a ruler in their heads. So, you need to kind of be reminded, but we and anyone that feels particularly insecure about their health goes to further measures and wears visors, just to make this absolutely clear from what was said before. One of the main reasons that we weren't able to film and stream this production is because it's written with a very complex orchestral score, and orchestras can't safely be in a pit with each other. We're hearing this music in our imaginations because it's being played on a piano. And now that's a very usual thing in opera rehearsals, that everything is reduced to a piano score for the rehearsals until you get to the orchestra rehearsals. However, we will leave the surprise and the joy of hearing the singers and the orchestra together, because we have got orchestral recordings that were done for us, for at least to kind of provoke our imaginations a year and a half, 2 years ago. The singers won't have been able to have the feeling of how loud certain sections are, how they sing over it, how intimate they can be, all of those things that you discover in the orchestral rehearsals, which are particularly important for new works. Magdalena, maybe you want to talk about that.
Yeah, sure. I think especially if there is a piece which we've never heard before, there are always surprises, and it also takes some time to adjust to the new sound. But from the other hand, I think it's also extremely exciting to do something we don't know and other people didn't do before. I had also this pleasure actually this season to work on, this is my second creation, which is for me quite unusual thing. And I think it's incredibly so refreshing when you can have a live composer there and you can really talk to the person and to say, oh, look here, maybe I would need it like this, or this doesn't work for me, or etc. So I mean, this luxury of being the first doing something nobody knows, it's sort of a dream. I often kind of envied pop singers, that people write songs for them and they don't have to simply repeat something what many singers sang in the past, and everybody compares it if you sang it as good as this one or that one. So in a way that you can be actually the first one and you can have the dialogue with the composer and director, it's just something incredibly special.
Magdalena, how do you feel in this environment where you have to be more careful about distance, etc.? Is it scary? Is it uncomfortable? Or is it not really different from the usual rehearsals?
You know, when you put real emotions into it and you're supposed to have argument with someone and you can't just come very close to it, in some ways you have to kind of put a break on yourself and respect it. But it's what it is. As Simon said, actually, the truth is we can imagine it. We can imagine kissing somebody and not to kiss him, or, you know, some other physical contact. So, you know, for this first rehearsals and for kind of a deepening everything, you know, in your body, the music, the technical things, the emotional things. I think it's actually a good exercise to kind of say, okay, I can go only to this point. Yeah, it's not exactly the same thing, but it's possible. And as a kind of working material, it's definitely, everybody should try that if they are afraid of it. I don't think there's any problem with it.
I wanted to ask Kaija if you think, like Pierre, that this unusual way of preparing a world creation somehow has its advantages, and that it allows the singers to get a maturity that will blossom in the coming months, so that maybe when they will actually perform your opera in front of an audience, there will be something more deeply rooted maybe in their body, in their mind. Do you think that?
Well, I think it's good for all of us. It is very different situation that I have had with my previous operas. And in fact, rehearsing contemporary new big piece to important festival like this one is, for example, it's very, very demanding and very stressful, of course. There's never enough time. In every opera rehearsals, there are some dramas that happen. It just cannot be otherwise, because there are all these strong personalities. We all have all our personal worries about the details, our voice, our work. We are so many who have all these things that think, you know, my thing is most important. So there have been many crazy things happening in rehearsals. And compared to that, I feel that this is less crazy, because we all know that we don't need on July 14, we don't need to be on stage in front of the audiences, orchestra rehearsed, choir, all that. So I think this might be really, in fact, very good thing. And there are many important and humanly deep things for every person. There are 13 roles in this piece, and some of them are not maybe very large roles, but every role is very, very important.
Do you think there are things that were invented during this crisis that we were not used to do before, but that we were obliged to invent, to improvise, that we will keep after the crisis is over in the way you practice your job?
As a composer, there is not so much new things, because when my music is performed very much, in fact, I am used to communicate by internet. I go even to music rehearsals of orchestras, and there's a screen and I can hear them rehearsing. But what I do like is for example, us discussing right now. Nobody needs to travel for that to some place. Now this has become very banal during this crisis. So I think that's a very good thing. We all know that we should travel less. And I know that every travel I do, it's away from my composition. So that is a good thing, at least.
And you, Simon, as a director, do you think there are things you could keep after the crisis is over?
Actually, more to do with my other work, not, you know, where I write. When I'm writing, I've realized now that there's a peacefulness being, because I like to write while I'm rehearsing with people. And in this particular instance, the show that I was doing in Amsterdam. Before this, I was able to write it during COVID, and we had a lot of contact with each other over the internet, but I was still able to be at home with my wife, and so I was in a much better mood. The working from home thing is very good for writers, I think, for people who are composing or writing, because you always have this horror that your work will involve kind of disappearing from your family life or something like that. And writing is a very lonely thing to do, regardless of whether or not you're actually, so being away from home and writing can be really quite scary sometimes. So I think that that's been a great discovery, that there are different ways that you can work. If someone says to me now, this is a catastrophe or this is a nightmare during an artistic process, again, I imagine nobody will ever do that again, but if they did, you just go, well, no, we know what a catastrophe is, what a crisis is. And a lot of people knew what a crisis is for a long time before this, but they just happen to not be the privileged bunch that we're usually making the work. So I think having, the kind of privileged elite, having had an experience of a situation where that they weren't able to control, is hopefully going to, give us all a little bit more emphasis on why we make the art that we make. And that's the really inspiring thing about being in the rehearsals. It's a very important work. It's a very touching, moving, humanistic opera that Kaija has created with a librettist. There are a significant number of younger characters in the opera because of the subject matter. The energy of those younger actors, singers, it's quite wonderful, because the lack of frustration of kind of going, well, this is not how I usually do it, or I don't like, this is different or whatever. They don't know, because it's, it's their first thing anyway. So they're just going, yep, sure, fine. And I think that that's been really good for the rest of the ensemble as well, because you have this energy around you that everything's possible. So everyone else just goes, oh, everything's possible. And the piece is just very moving. We rehearsed the final scene for the first time today, and the second last scene for the second time today. And it is just in everyone's souls, and it's very moving, and it's really inspiring. And I can't wait to be able to share it with the world. To all of you, French governmental people out there, let's pull it all together and make sure X Festival next year is the way it should be.
And you, Magdalena, do you think there are some positive things that were born during this crisis that you will keep as a singer after the crisis?
We all artists have to be a little bit more local. For example, in Berlin, where there's a lot of singers who live there, we could work more together in theaters and avoid constant traveling, taking planes all the time. And I think it would do very well to us as well as the planet. I had a lot of time to think what I want to sing, what I want really in life, to practice in peace during all this COVID lockdown. And I think it's not only me, I think everybody just went inside of themselves and kind of really discovered what is important in life. And I think this will stay, and I'm really hoping that it will make things change and a bit better for the future.
I would like to ask the same question to Pierre, because as the general manager of a festival, do you think that the way we organized ourselves during all these months will be maybe useful? We can keep some things of this organization in the future among the people working for the festival?
The festival team was very fast, impressively fast in improvising, something that we had no experience of. First organizing these rehearsals, but also the whole digital festival was something new for the organization. The effect and value of that, I would like to keep as something useful to have alongside the live festival. I think we've learned something very strong from this as an organization. I'm very curious to see how the audience will respond to the festival, or whether they will come online, whether they will follow the debates, watch the streamings, the recitals, the concerts. Again, it's something new. It's kind of the unknown. I think the reality of opera being an art form that needs 4 years planning, we are not going to be able to change that very much when it comes to the big pieces and the very complex projects. So somehow we will stay at the mercy of that unless we change completely the repertoire and the intentions of a festival like this one. But right now, having run for 30 years an opera house, I feel blessed that I'm now involved with the festival. So my headache is not what's happening in September or October. I'm living in hope that the next festival in 21 will happen. I expect that in the next year, there will be new lessons to be learned. I look forward to applying them, although I'm very scared of the idea that if we can't perform in 21, because nobody really knows, a festival like this one will have great difficulty surviving because it's not a building, it's not an institution, it doesn't have a civic function. It's an event which is a gift, a miracle, a Pandora's box with, all sorts of surprises waiting for an experimental stage. It's a place for experiments, for discoveries, for risks. I believe that festivals have a very important role to play in relation to institutions. I would hope that somehow this crisis will be over by then, and that we can continue to exist, be a platform that will help the institutions that have to operate day in, day out, every month. Because in fact, our audience is also that audience. We have a kind of dialogue with opera houses. We co-produce all our productions with other opera houses. This festival completely depends on co-production. We have to hope that this artistic chain is not going to be broken by COVID, but strengthened by COVID. I live in hope, but of course, we just don't know. That's the point.
Coming back to the piece itself, to Innocence, do you think that, knowing that it is a piece, Simon said a few words about it, it's very moving, it's something very strong, I think, so very powerful. It tells a story that is somehow violent and dark, but very profound at the same time. Do you think that this darkness and the tension that there is in the score has somehow benefited from the tension there is right now in the world? People are still afraid. People are thinking of death. Do you think that somehow it has tainted a little bit the piece, and that the piece and the time kind of fit together? Kaija?
No, I don't think at all. I think the world has been crazy for many years now, and we have all been expecting something unbelievably horrible to happen. It has happened now, and this piece has been composed in this expectation. The past 20 years, the world has changed completely. Many urgent crises have become more and more urgent. And when I think about young people, this is their life. This is what they have grown up to be young adults, for example. This is what is their reality. When I grew up after war, when the wealth came to Europe and everything seemed to be like a growing dream. It was a very idealistic time. I don't know what people want to see after this COVID, but I hope, as Magdalena said, that we all had time to think really what is important in our life. In that sense, I of course hope that this work speaks to people. People are interested in other people, but through the opera is a strange mirror. Unlike other music, you mirror your own life often if the opera performance is successful. It sends you back good things and questions and answers. And in that sense, I think this opera can be needed when it can be performed.
I agree. I think what people are looking for at the moment is a version of catharsis. I don't think people are avoiding difficult topics nowadays. If you look at the kinds of shows that are trending very highly on Netflix, it's not just feel-good comedies. You know, there's some quite, you know, deep, dark work being appreciated. However, it comes down to the humanist or lack of humanist approach of the work. Kaija believes in catharsis. You can tell it's in the piece. It's about the building of tension, but then the release of tension and the beginning of a glimmer of some kind of honesty, and in that honesty, I suppose, hope. But the journey in the piece is one towards recognition of the past, as opposed to, you know, in a very, very explicitly Freudian tradition, there is repression of the secrets of the past turning into a version of familial perversion or self-destruction, and through confrontation of the past and an acknowledgement of the secrets that have been kept, and these secrets coming out into the open, and people facing their greatest fears, there's a moment of release that occurs. It's very therapeutic, the work, because anyone who has been used to turning a blind eye to their own problems and the fear that they have if they admit to themselves what they're truly most afraid of and really face it, it's a really beautiful and moving opera about the fact that you can take a step into that abyss and the world's not going to end. It's going to be awful, it's going to be difficult, but we will continue. And the piece is very humane in its treatment of its characters. I mean, I've noticed as well that I'm a lot more labile than I usually am since COVID started, because I think a lot more about the world. But, you know, I've come to these rehearsals and I'm moved like I very rarely am in rehearsals. And it's to do with the incredibly delicate work that Kaija put into the emotional journeys from scene to scene, the surprises, but also the deepening truths. I think particularly appealing in the time that we're living in.
Do you feel, Magdalena, this cathartic dimension of the piece, especially through your role, because you play the role of a mother who lost her daughter 10 years ago and who has difficulties to go through this trauma?
As a mother of 3 children myself, it's a extremely emotionally hard task to play this role, and to every time I practiced it at home, and I really thought deeply what it all means and what every sentence means. It was just sometimes even really very hard to bear to say all this and to feel that. And it's actually a picture of a person who lost the most beloved person in the world and didn't manage actually to move on, didn't manage to forgive others, and now came to this wedding where she basically decides to spoil it because she was so hurt and she can't simply cope with it. So it's very intense. But what I think, if I just, this is my role, but of course there are other 12 person telling their own stories. And what is fascinating, that everybody somehow feels a little bit also of their own guilt, and it's not just black and white, and everybody really brings their deepest fears and emotions out, and all together at the end, even though it's very dark. And I was surprised by it. It somehow feels positive. I couldn't think about that before I started rehearsing. And now I just feel that all this energy together can create something which is not maybe happy, but can move the whole thing to a bit less dark places.
These are dark times, but there are positive things coming from it. And I feel in this discussion, which I thank you for, something, very positive and optimistic, and trying to go on and to make of these sometimes difficult, complicated things something useful, something beautiful. Thank you to all of you for this very interesting discussion. I wish you a good work in the coming days. Let's meet again in 1 year when finally Innocence will be created on stage in front of an audience. Thank you.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.